Hello and welcome to Tuesday's webinar. This is 7 in the series of Kill Corona by Getting Smarter. And today we even have one participant with us from the epicenter in Europe. So glad you are still here with us. Today we're going to talk about, well, the theme, the title is It Wasn't My Fault. But what we're going to talk about today is accountability. So what does it mean to take responsibility? Are you the victim or are you the one making things happen? That's today's theme. So as usual, I'm just going to share my PowerPoint and then we can start the show. So it is really about a lot of people. They will say, well, it wasn't my fault. It was just the circumstances. It was this happened. But at the end of the day, what did you do? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And very sort of deliberately, I've taken the picture of Costa Concordia, where you definitely had even a trial about whose fault it was. And there was definitely circumstances around it as well, where you could argue the captain was the victim, but because he left the ship as the first one, he definitely got the blame. Other things were involved in this, and we can talk about norms that was there, and that we can call circumstances. So it is actually a much more complex case than it was put out in the press. But enough about that. That's not what we're going to be spending more time on, just as an example that some of you probably are familiar with. I want to start off with sharing a little story. There were 4 people and an important job to be done. There was everybody, anybody, somebody, and nobody. And nobody knew that everybody was not going to do it. Everybody was sure that somebody would do it, and anybody could have done it, and in the end, nobody did it. And I don't know if that sounds familiar, but this is very often what goes on. So we think that everybody else and they should do, and notice the should word, because the question is, who does their shoulds, and why didn't we do it ourselves? And this is again where we have to look into. Now, if we take the definition of accountability, it means more than just doing your job, because that's not being accountable. It means being responsible, and it means being powerful. And also that you are striving to make things better, to pursue excellence, and also to do things in ways that achieve results much further than just the goals you have, or even the business goals you have. Now, I don't know if you recognize the guy in the image. He's a very famous British runner. Actually, his name is Roger Bannister. And back when he was in his regime of running, they were competing about breaking the so-called 4-minute mile. And a lot of people tried, and generally speaking, there was a belief nobody could do it. But he went to pursue excellence. He said, it can be done. It has to be possible. And then he started training more and differently. And lo and behold, he did. Now, here comes the interesting thing, and this is why I was thinking this is such a great story in Roger Bannister, because after that, in the following month, several people were able to run below the 4-minute on the mile. Now knowing that somebody else had done it. But if Roger Bannister hadn't pursued that excellence, if he hadn't strived for that amazing result, then maybe we would still be running above 4 minutes on the mile. Now, I know with modern technique, in particular for those of you who can actually see the shoes, I'm sure that they can run a lot faster. But still, for a very long time, this was a barrier that couldn't be broken. We see this in other sports disciplines, marathon running as well, for instance. And they have been running faster and faster and faster, chopping off 10 seconds here, 10 seconds there. Why? Because somebody makes himself accountable for reaching that magic 2-hour limit. Now, we have the unofficial world record, but because of the wrong shoes, in no real race, it doesn't count. But it's just an example again. And I know I'm going into sports here, but there's so many great metaphors in sports that we can use and make equivalent into the business as well. So think about it from your perspective. If you think about what you're doing in your work, if you think about the nature of your business, and if you think about the team or the colleagues you have or the setup you have. Start thinking about the things where you say, this is my responsibility, or where you potentially leaning back and saying, oh, I can't do anything about it. I'm just the victim here. And then start listing inside yourself, where do you have most? Now, we do know that some people are definitely driven by being the victim. These are the people who will complain, they will nag, but they will never do anything about it. So how come that is possible? Well, we're going to link it into the motives at the end of this session, the motives that I keep referring to, and hopefully you don't getting fed up with them because they are so super important. But even more so, we hear and see in team meetings, we see it as leaders, people sitting there just complaining and saying, I can't do anything about it, waiting for somebody else. And then we see the ones taking initiative and driving the process forward. And this is what I recommend. So if you're the leader today, I kindly suggest you also take a look at your team as I'm going through this and start thinking about what are the behaviors of the people that you have, who does what. Now, if we look even more closer, you can see this where you have on the top responsible and powerful people, and at the bottom you have the victims and the powerless people. Now, what's in there? Well, if we start from the bottom, this is people who are unaware. So they don't even know what's going on. And for that reason, of course, nothing happens because of them, at least not anything good. Then we have the ones who is blaming others. It could be blaming others for things not happening. It could be blaming others for things happening. And it could also be when they make a mistake that they blame others. And this could very much be related to the motive. And the same thing goes with the next category. Excuses or reasons that I can't. So when you are challenging them on why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done so? Then they're going to come up with the excuses and they're going to have a whole list of reasons why it's not possible. Then you have the ones who's just kind of a little complacent. They're just waiting, hoping things get better. So at least I'm not too much in the focus. And then on the other side of that, you have the ones who acknowledge reality, who at least understand what's going on. They may not fully take responsibility, but at least they acknowledge what is real. On top of that, we have the people taking ownership. Now, if you think about your team, you think about leading people, it is about creating ownership for the tasks they have, that's for sure. But one thing is taking ownership, the other thing are the people driving even more forward, looking and searching, finding solutions. For instance, right now, with the situation going on around the world, we see scientists working probably 24 hours a day. They're not sitting there and just saying, well, it's somebody else's fault. They are working their behinds off to find the solution, to make it happen, to find a cure, to find out and understand more about the problem so that we can stop this pandemic. And this is the kind of people you want to build in your team as well. The ones who make it happen, the ones who will help you drive your team forwards, the ones who says things happen because of me, because I'm doing something active to make it happen. On the other hand, when you have the people just sitting there waiting for things to happen, you can ask yourself, are they really the people I want or need in my team? And most likely not. What I'm saying here isn't that you should fire them, but you definitely have to work with them to make them understand that they have to be more accountable. And this is something that is so important. Now, what can you do about it? Well, here's a whole list, and this is one of the more boring slides with a lot of bullets on, but I want you to kind of go through this, and we're going to do it together. So first of all, you have to challenge your people that you tell when they tell you that someone did this to them. So when they do that, what did you do? What did you say? Because it's so easy to just say it was them. It was they did this and then this happened to me. It's very, very easy. And a lot of people will get away with it. And then afterwards having the manager sitting there going, blah. But how does that help you moving forward? So you gotta go in and challenge them and say, okay, what did you do? Ask them, because they may not have thought about it. So what was their role? What did they say? What did they do? And the more you ask them, the more you force them to reflect, the more their brains will start connecting the dots. And this is the job of the leader, because they may never have been trained in this. So it is your job. Now, you also have to make people acknowledge the reality of the existing problems and understand the consequences of not doing anything. And this is, again, where a lot of people don't know that because they don't have the bigger picture. This is the task of the leader, to provide that bigger picture. And if you're the leader, it is your job. You cannot wait for them to find it themselves. And this is, again, a super important aspect of this. Also, you have to try to broaden their scope of understanding about a problem they face. So again, how do we examine this? Bring in other resources, see it from different perspectives. This links very much to the one above this one. So again, the more we start building understanding, the more we start sharing with people, what are the consequences of not doing? What is the consequences of just saying it was somebody else instead of looking at yourself? The more we help them continue doing. So we gotta get into that mode where we start challenging people. Now, of course, if you have a little bit of curiosity as a leader and you don't mind asking questions, it's gonna help you. If you are low on curiosity, you don't like asking questions, just let's get the job done, you probably will find it difficult to do this, but this is what you have to practice then. Now, when you're with the team or with the individuals, another important aspect is that the discussions you have around a problem focus more on what you can do instead of just listing what can't be done. So many people, when you address an issue, address a problem, they go, well, we can't do that, or we already tried that, because it's so much easier. It doesn't require an effort. It's so much easier. We can just lean back, say, nah, can't do it. But the can-do people, the people with the can-do attitude, they're not going to say that. They're going to look at it and say, okay, how can we do it? So this is a great question. Instead of asking, can you do it? Simply ask them, how can you do it? Because it changes the brain structure in that by shifting that word. So can you do? Well, I don't know. And then it's very easy if you're uncertain to say, no, I can't. But if you say, how can you do this? You force them into a way of thinking where they're going to have to look for the solution. Now, occasionally, when you have a lot of brainy people and they put their heads together, they do come out and say, actually, it can't be done, but at least we examine all the possible means and ways. At that time, maybe it's okay to say we cannot. But from the beginning, just take for granted, presuppose that this can be done. You may not know the way, but just presuppose that it can be done. And I'm thankful for the scientists working their behinds off right now on behalf of humanity on this planet, that they have a can-do attitude. Because otherwise they would just lean back and say, can't do anything, too bad. So let's send a little bit of gratitude toward these people. I know there's a lot of gratitude being sent to everybody in the health industry right now, and I'm sure in your countries as well. But we should also remember these scientists, because I'm sure they're working day and night with a can-do attitude, taking responsibility, holding themselves accountable for finding that cure that can save the planet. Another very important thing is that you got to be the role model, because if you're not the role model, you're not going to teach them. So when people are offering their perspective, make sure you listen and show clearly that you are listening. If you don't care about them, well, then again, it's easier not to speak up. And this is where you got to train the culture. You got to feed the culture with this understanding that their words and their perspective is appreciated. You want them to contribute because you got to train them to contribute. And this is one of the steps. Also, be open to feedback and personal input from others. It's slightly different than perspective, because perspective is more about different perspectives, whereas feedback and personal input is more like, this is how I see you. And again, we could argue that that's also a different perspective, and yes, it is, but there is sure a difference from collecting different perspectives and then just be open to the feedback you get from the other people, including the people in your team. So again, here be the role model. I cannot say that enough in these trainings. You as a leader, the more you're the role model, the more you inspire people to do the right thing. If you have lack of progress, if you're the team leader and you don't get the results you want, acknowledge it and share with the team what you did that didn't work. Share with them that you did something, but at least take the responsibility and say, I did my best, I really worked hard on this, I didn't get the results I expected. But instead of just saying, start coming up with excuses. I have seen and heard that over my time so often, leaders sitting there and talking about why other people prevented the results of the team. Let's look inside and just say what we did and focus on that. It is a much more positive approach. And then if you make a mistake, acknowledge it. If you try to hide that you make mistakes, if you try to be the one who say, I'm perfect, nothing happens, and when something happens, it's definitely the employee's fault or the somebody else's fault. Again, no, we all make mistakes. Hold yourself accountable for the ones you make. It is human nature to make mistakes. Some people don't like it, some people don't care so much, but it is human nature. We make them over and over again, hopefully not the same ones, because then it's different. But we make mistakes, and it is okay to make a mistake as long as you learn from it. And that is, again, a crucial aspect to have here. Now, one of the things that I have talked about is how motives can influence. And again, I just took the whole list here of the 16 motives, and some of you are going, oh, we're going to go through those again. No, we're not going through all 16, so you can rest. But we are going to talk about which ones are the important ones to focus on. And we're going to do it from two perspectives. We're going to do it from you as a leader, and we're going to do it from the perspective of the people not being accountable or being accountable. And again, this is a non-judgmental tool, so it's just a guideline. You still have to go dig a little bit deeper to understand, but just where are the drivers that potentially could be leading them into the wrong behavior. Now, and we're just going to start and just go with the clock. So curiosity, if you as a leader score somewhat on curiosity to the right in the red zone, then you will be helped here, because that means you by nature will ask more questions. If you happen to be low on curiosity scoring in the blue direction, you simply don't do it as much by nature. So you have to prepare, think about it, okay, I need to ask more questions today. So you force yourself to do it, again, to create that perspective that creates a bigger and better understanding of the full picture. Social acceptance is super important here, because on one hand, we have the people who are the perfectionists who don't want to make a mistake, because then the world collapses and they will be afraid to be kicked out of the team. On the other hand, we have people who believe so much in themselves that they think they can pretty much walk on water, also in the summertime. And where a mistake is just something that happens, and then we move back up on the horse and move on. Trial and error method is a great learning process. So here we will find people not being too open necessarily about the mistakes they make, because it is a catastrophe. On the other hand, because they're perfectionists, and I'm talking about when they score to the right, they don't make that many because it has to be perfect. But if you stress them, if you push them for those results, they may start doing it, or they may get stressed because, again, you're not giving me time enough to really do this right. This is not about fidgeting with details, it's about making it perfect so there's no mistakes, right? So people who are scoring to the left on social acceptance will be more prone to take responsibility because they have a bigger trust in themselves. So a little failure here and there doesn't hurt my image, it doesn't hurt my self-confidence, so I can better accept it. When we come to the power motive, which is more about the leadership, the responsibility motive, when people scoring to the right, well, they like, generally speaking, to take responsibility. Now, there is a little sort of quote unquote here like to, because again, it depends on the combinations here. So right now we're just looking at them individually, but you have to combine this with others to see how it's actually going to play out. But in the rough basic form, yes, scoring to the right will take responsibility, and scoring to the left don't want to take responsibility. However, to the left, they can do for their own thing. So be careful with this one, but it could have an impact. The same thing with status. If you happen to scoring to the right on high on status, well, again here, if it hurts your status, you might not admit the mistake, because what will happen to my status? When we go down to autonomy, this is an interesting one, because again, scoring to the right means you want to be more independent from other people. Scoring to the left means you want to be more part of the team. So you could argue, and this is a little hypothetical, but people who are scoring to the right might be more prone to take it themselves, whereas the other ones will try to take it together with the team. And then we come to one that is super important, and that is principles. Principles, which you see at the bottom there with the four hands crossing over, is really about, to the right in the red direction, is really about taking responsibility, holding yourself accountable, holding a word. My word is my bond. That also means that sometimes they might even take the responsibility, although in reality it maybe wasn't theirs or wasn't fully theirs. So something definitely to look out for. When you go in the opposite direction to the left, you have people who are more risk willing in terms of breaking procedures, in terms of allowing everything just to meet the goal. So the goal allows the means, right? So in this case, you have to think about, because once you start challenging them on something that doesn't work, they will be very, very prone to say that it wasn't their fault, it wasn't their responsibility, and they'll be very quick to blame others. And again, we are talking about scores in the extreme, so just be that little caution in there. But definitely one that has a huge impact. Safety is also interesting, because people to the left do like more risk, whereas people to the right like less risk, actually don't want risk. So again, you can see the combination here with safety and principles. If you have somebody scoring to the left on principles and left on safety, they both want to meet the goal, and they are willing to break the procedures, and they are really willing to run a high risk. And if something goes wrong, they're also willing to blame others. So in this case, it could be, but again, you got to look at the combinations. I'm just saying it as examples for you, again, to understand how much these motives influences what the choices of our behavior in the daily life. So these are some of the important ones. I'm sure that we could spend the whole day talking about possible combinations here, but this is again what we have to think about. So again, and sorry for that, I've got to put my phone on silent. Happens sometimes, you think about the wrong things. Anyway, the combinations are important, so be careful not using this tool as a judgmental tool. It really isn't, but it tells us where the motivation is. What are people trying to achieve? Because that makes them feel good. So this was about the motives. So, and again, the session today, accountability, taking responsibility. So start looking at yourself and saying, how often do I do it, and when do I not do it, if there are cases when you don't? Again, some of you may already know your motives if you've already done the profile. Some of you have no clue, but you may have an idea about what you do. Be open and honest to yourself. It's a good start. Second is think about the people you're leading if you are a leader. Who in your team does what? Who takes responsibility? Who is quick to blame others? Who is quick at saying we can do? Who is quick at saying we cannot do? So you start getting a clue about who to work on. It's not about getting rid of people, it's about working on them, helping them, gaining. And again, you saw the bullets, they're just extracts, but I'm sure from the recording you can extract that and start working with the people in your team. So again, I want to do a little promotion here. This is today, it wasn't my fault. Tomorrow we're going to have perfectionism and the fear of failure. Again, relating it back to the motives, understand this thing that I talked about earlier. Then we're going to have feedback caught by assumptions, And then promoting next week's, where you'll see it's Monday and Wednesday, virtual leadership, how to keep momentum, motivation, and follow-up. And this is particularly important in these times. And then also by request, overcoming team differences, how to reconcile in a team. And again, I'm opening up, if you want to send me a suggestion, something you would like me to do a webinar on, something you would like my perspective on, do send suggestions. I'm quite sure that I'm going to be sending these in the next couple of weeks, at least here in Denmark, until after Easter, and I'm sure it will be prolonged even more than that, and I'll keep sending them. So do send suggestions. I do appreciate it. So we're going to stop the recording now, and I want to thank you for being part today before we stop that, and then we're going to open up for the Q&A session. So just a second.